So we know that Gustav Klimt's The Kiss was inspired by a detail from the Beethoven frieze. And what we also think is that what inspired this look that he became so well known for was actually Byzantine mosaic. So if you look at the robes, for example, the patterning, and you just took a square cutout here and a square cutout here, you would see that there's no perspective, that this is simply flat patterning. And although he uses paint and gold leaf, and this is mosaic, it has a similar quality to it, and it really does shimmer in the light. In keeping with that idea of Art Nouveau and Jugendstil and the collaborations that so many of these artists were a part of, Gustav Klimt collaborated with Joseph Hoffman in his creation of Palais Stossel, which is still there in Brussels, Belgium today, and it's even still owned privately by the family. So it is not open to the public. But what's so remarkable is that it's a great example of modern design on the exterior. And in the dining room, Gustav Klimt got the task of designing the murals. And again, he uses this rich patterning and gold leaf, which is his signature look. Gustav Klimt also has a very interesting relationship with women. He had a very close friend, companion, and confidant whose name was Emilie Flügge, who I'm showing you here in dresses that she created. She was a dressmaker for women in Vienna's high society, and she was known for revolutionizing women's wear. And if you think about what had come up before, it was things that were very restrictive, that had corsets and ties, and they were very tight and then poofed out at the bottom. And these dresses that she created, which as you can see have that patterning that's so similar to the work that you see of Gustav Klimt, were actually called reform dresses because they were looser, they were more relaxed, and they allowed women to abandon the corset and move much more freely. These two seem to have inspired one another throughout their lives, and it's also known that Gustav Klimt typically wore sandals and these long robes, and so they say no undergarments when he was working in his studio. And he also led a pretty simple life that was quite cloistered and devoted to his art. And he also lived with his mother and his spinster sisters. So unlike many other artists in Vienna, he avoided cafe society. He seldom socialized or attended all of the big events. And usually those who commissioned him to create work came to his door. So he could afford to be highly selective about what he chose to paint and who he chose to paint. It's also interesting to note, just in terms of his relationship with women, that it is believed that he fathered at least 14 children by his models and other working class women, but he never married, and he kept his affairs quite discreet and avoided any kind of personal scandal. He did one portrait of his good friend, Emilie Flügge, which you see here on the left, and you can also see the kind of patterning on a dress, and I'm showing you a photograph of her wearing one of these very interesting dresses that she designed. Gustav Klimt says about himself at one point, in one of his very rare statements, he says this, quote, "I can paint and draw. Only two things are certain. One, I have never painted a self-portrait. I am less interested in myself as a subject for painting than I am in other people, above all women. But other subjects interest me even more. I'm convinced that I'm not particularly interesting as a person. There's nothing special about me. I'm a painter who paints day after day from morning until night. Figures, landscapes, portraits less often. I have the gift of neither the spoken nor the written word, especially if I have to say something about myself or my work. Whoever wants to know something about me as an artist, the only notable thing, ought to look carefully at my pictures and try to see in them what I am and what I want to do." So one of the women who he also had a close friendship with and who he painted twice, the only woman actually he painted twice, is Adele Bloch-Bauer. And so I'm showing you her photograph here in 1910. And I'm showing you the portrait he did of her in 1912. And this one, which is called The Portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer. And I'm showing you on the right-hand side, Emilie Flügge again, with one of her dress designs. She most likely designed the dress that is worn by Adele Bloch-Bauer in this portrait that was done in 1907. Now, the work itself is quite stunning. There is that same kind of flat, abstract patterning. If you look closely, right here it says A.B., which refers to her name, Adele Bloch-Bauer. She is a notable Jewish woman living in Vienna at this point in time. And her family collected art, and these two portraits were owned by her. She died before World War II broke out, but during the Nazi occupation of Austria, this work was removed from her family's residence and ultimately placed on view at the Austrian National Gallery. It became something of a scandal beginning really in the late 90s and early 2000s when her niece, Maria Altmann, sued the country of Austria for restitution, claiming that the work had been stolen from her family and that it didn't belong to the Austrian National Gallery, but it rightfully belonged to her family. There's actually a wonderful film called Woman in Gold that stars Ryan Reynolds and Helen Mirren, who plays Adele Bloch-Bauer. It's a great film from 2015 if you're interested in knowing more about this story. But I will tell you how it ends. Although it's a very contested and heated debate, ultimately in 2006 it was decided that her niece, Maria Altmann, who you see here now on the right, is the rightful owner of this work. It was removed from the Austrian National Gallery, and then Maria Altmann sold it for $135 million to Ronald Lauder of the Estee Lauder fortune, who has this wonderful museum in New York City, which is called the Neue Gallery. And it's a museum that is exclusively for German and Austrian art. So if you want to see Woman in Gold or the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer today, you only have to go as far as New York.